This is my second episode on a series about Israel and Palestine. The first episode was about the history of the two and what you may not know about it. And you can catch that video right here. Now, you don't need to see that to see this, but I would appreciate it if you did watch it at some point. But this video is going to be talking about the Trump administration and everything that they did to actually bring peace to the Middle East and keep us from going into further war and turmoil. So we're going to learn what Jared Kushner did while he was in charge of the Middle East policy under the Trump administration. And there will be one more episode after this on the origin of this conflict and how and why we did not see this coming. So sit back, relax, enjoy this. I hope you get something out of it. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe. During the Trump administration, Jared Kushner took the lead on a lot of the Middle East policy and doing a lot of the dealing over there in the Middle East. So I'm going to let him explain quickly what they did to be successful during Trump's term.
And he did things like recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized the Golan Heights. He got out of the Iran deal. We did an economic conference in Bahrain where we brought Israelis to meet with, Saudi and Emirati and Qatari businessmen, and everyone came together. And each one of these instances were unthinkable previously. And everyone said that if you did it, the world was going to end. And every time President Trump did one, the next morning the sun rose, the next evening the sun set, and things moved on. And so by doing that, what President Trump did was he slaughtered a lot of the sacred cows of.
One common thing you've probably heard is, oh, the people of Palestine, they don't support Hamas. They're basically being held captive by them. But the truth is, Hamas has been in power for 16 years now. There's been no major uprisings or protests against them, and their leaders are being held up and taken care of up in Qatar. So it doesn't really seem like anybody's against Hamas there, but if you look at the response around the world, even from some of our congressional members, Rashida Tlaib, does it look to you like they don't support Hamas?
I mean, Hamas has been running it now for 16 years. And they don't have a lot to show for it. And, our posture with them was basically a very simple deal. If you think about what's the end state in Gaza, it's actually not that complicated. It's, there's no territorial disputes, right? The border's the border. There's no religious issues there as well. You're not dealing with Jerusalem. You're basically just dealing with the fact that, Israel wants to make sure that there's no threat from Gaza. So it's a demilitarization or some kind of security guarantee from a credible source where Israel doesn't feel like Gaza can be used to stage attacks into Israel or to fire rockets into Israel. And by the way, these are things I was saying, 3-4 years ago, that was the objective. And that was really the fear. Now that's been proven, unfortunately, the fear has manifested. And in exchange, you can rebuild the place and you can give the people a much better life. But Hamas has not shown a desire for that or a capability for that. And I don't think there's enough trust to allow them to do that, which is why, under the current circumstances, if you do want to have peace there, Hamas has to be either eliminated or severely degraded in terms of their military capabilities.
You may remember at the beginning of the Trump administration, or right before he got into office when they were doing the transition, Trump was kind of bad-mouthing Saudi Arabia a little bit, and he had a pretty tough stance against them. But in order to really get any cooperation done in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia was key. And here's Jared Kushner describing how he came to actually discover the importance of Saudi Arabia, and hear eventually how he was able to skirt the normal processes to actually achieve success.
And then during the transition, I was asked by several friends to meet with a representative of Saudi Arabia. I said, I don't want to meet with them, but I came over and I met and they said, well, we want to make changes. And I said, well, you have to make changes, to how you treat women. Then women couldn't drive. They had guardianship laws. So you got to start working with Israel. You have to be paying more of your fair share, and you have to be, stopping the Wahhabism that's being spread. Again, I had no knowledge. These were just kind of the traditional talking points about Saudi Arabia. So the guy I was with basically said, is a guy, Fadel Tunzi, who's a very respected minister there. He says, Jared says, you don't know much about Saudi Arabia, do you? I said, no, I don't. It's just really what I've kind of been told or what I read. And he says, okay, let me do this. We want to be great allies with America. We've traditionally been great allies with America. Can I come back to you with a proposal on ways that we can make progress on all of the different areas where we have joint interests? And keep in mind, at that point in time, the Middle East was a mess. And probably the single biggest issue we had after ISIS was the ideological battle. If you remember in 2016, there was the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando. You had the San Bernardino shooting. And people were being radicalized online with the extremism, and then there was a lot of crimes that were that were happening because of that. And it was a big topic in the campaign. And so that, when I was thinking about, talking to different generals and what capabilities the U.S. had to really combat the extremism and the ideological battle, what we realized was that Saudi Arabia, as the custodian of the two holiest sites in Islam, the Mecca and Medina, that would be the best partner to work with if they were willing to. But for years, they really hadn't been willing to kind of lean into this fight. So I said, sure, give a proposal. So they come back, give a proposal. And they said, look, if you make President Trump's first trip to Saudi Arabia, we will do all these different things. We'll increase our military spending and cooperation. We'll counter all the terror financing. Unbelievable layer. So I took the proposal. I went to the national, then it was General Flynn. I said, if Saudi Arabia did these things, would this be considered a big deal? Unbelievable, but it will never happen. I said, well, they're telling me they want to do these things. Again, having no foreign policy experience, I'm just saying I've got somebody telling me they want to do it. And that's kind of where we started.
I want to just highlight the importance of what's happening here, and that is Jared Kushner has gotten a proposal that seems unbelievable to the regular establishment. Even General Flynn said, oh, this will never happen. But the thing that was really successful about the Trump administration, or the thing that really made them successful, was not always listening to conventional wisdom, which is, the normal politician thing. They get into office and they listen to the bureaucrats because the bureaucrats are the permanent personnel who know what's going on. Well, that's not how President Trump and his administration worked, and it drove them nuts.
We get into office, I don't think much more about it. And then I think it was like maybe a month in, President Trump has a call with King Salman. Mm-hmm. And before the call, we're in the Oval Office, and the president's basically saying, well, this is what we want to go through. And I have Secretary Mattis and Secretary Tillerson, the Minister of Defense and the Secretary of State, basically saying, you have to deal with MBN. MBN is the guy who's been our partner for all these years. He's the head of intelligence, and he's been a great partner. I said, well, if he's been a great partner, then why do we have all these problems that you guys are complaining about with Saudi? Mm-hmm. I said, I've been told that we have this proposal from MBS, who's the Deputy Crown Prince, and that's who we should be dealing with on this. And so the phone call starts, and President Trump listened to both of us. And on the phone call with King Salman, President Trump says, okay, we'll go through all these things. These are the things we want to get done. And he says, well, who should we deal with? And King Salman says, deal with my son, the Deputy Crown Prince, MBS. And so President Trump said on the phone, have him deal with Jared. Because I think he knew that if he would have put him with the other guys, they were not believers in what he had the ability to do. And that's how I got assigned to work with him. I get back to my office after that, have an email from him, spoke to him for the first time. And then we just went to work. And, a lot of people were betting against that trip. They thought it wasn't going to be successful. And they've been betting against him. And he's been underestimated, but he's been doing an incredible job. And the whole Middle East is different today because of the work that he's done.
Maybe it's instructive to go through the mental journey that you went on, from like the talking points, the basic narratives, the very basic talking points, understanding of Saudi Arabia, to making that human connection with MBS and making the policy connection that it's actually possible to solve problems. Like, what was that journey like? Why was it so difficult to take for others? And why were you effective in being able to take that journey yourself?
Maybe some of it came from my inexperience, but my desire to listen and hear people. So, I had this proposal. I was told that all these things were good. Then we're trying to schedule this trip, and the National Security Council calls a meeting where we're in the Situation Room, and we have, Homeland Security, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, and everyone's saying this is going to be a disaster. They said, if we go to Saudi Arabia, the Saudis never keep their promises. And our Secretary of State at the time was a gentleman named Rex Tillerson, who'd been the CEO of Exxon. So he dealt with all these people very extensively. And he basically said, in my experience, the Saudis won't come through. And Jared, you don't know what you're doing. You're wasting your time.
This was something that really bothered me when I was in the military, and that's people not being able to try to think outside of the box, and people just thinking, well, we've always done things this way. Things are this way, and they must be this way for a reason, so let's not try to, deviate from that. Well, sometimes there's not a good reason for the way things are, and that's why it's important to understand the basis for everything that you do. Make sure that you know that what you're doing is still relevant, because one day it might not be.
I basically was at a point where I said, look, guys, but they're saying they want to do all these things. Shouldn't we at least give them a chance to try to do it? Like, why do we want to predetermine their direction by not giving them a chance to change? Just because things in the past haven't gone the way you want them to, that doesn't mean they can't go that way in the future. So we fought the battle. They basically deferred and let me go through with it. But when I do the planning meetings for the trip, nobody would show up because they all thought it was going to be an absolute disaster. And by the way, they probably weren't wrong to think that, because I'd never planned a foreign trip before, and I'd never done any foreign policy before. So during the planning, I'd speak to MBS almost every day, and I'd go through all the different details and the things that would be coming up. And I said, look, I really need to get these things in writing. He sent over a guy, Dr. Masad Al-Iban, who's a tremendous diplomat for them. And he came to Washington, stayed for 3 weeks, and we worked through all the different details of what we needed. And we ended up coming to an arrangement on what it should be. So, I think about now in retrospect why I was so focused on getting things like this done and why I even believed that they could be possible. But the answer is really the people I was talking to on the other end were telling me that these things were possible. And so just because they hadn't been done before, and just because others around me didn't believe that they could be done, I wasn't willing to just say, well, let's not try.
That's right. Jared tried and he succeeded. But let's look at things now and see what happened to all those Abraham Accords. Joe Biden came back into office and undid everything that the Trump administration did. They got back into the Iran nuclear deal and then ended up later on giving them $6 billion for a bunch of useless hostages. But that's it for this episode. In the next episode, we will go into why did they not see this happen and why did they not see this coming when this has actually been in preparation for quite a while. A very specific preparation too. And Israel has some of the best intelligence in the world. How did they not see this attack coming? Anyways, thanks for watching this. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed already and hit the like button because that'll help get this out. And I really appreciate you sticking around this long if you're still here. And until next time, peace be with you.